Welcome back to Inside the Village with Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief here at Village. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Well, she's vying to become the next leader of the federal Liberal Party. Karina Gould joins us on Inside the Village from Burlington. Karina, welcome to the show. Appreciate the time today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's jump right into this. You've obviously been busy as of late. We've got lots of questions about you and your campaign to become Justin Trudeau's successor as Liberal Party leader. But let's start by jumping right into the big issue of the day, tariffs. Donald Trump has made good on his threat, at least for now. If you're the Prime Minister next week, what's the first move you would make in this trade war?
Well, I think we need to put everything on the table, and I think we need to show Donald Trump that we mean business and we're not going to back down. So I would work with Premier Ford on electricity to the United States, and I would work with any premier across this country who has other ideas for how we can have maximum impact on the U.S. Because when it comes to dealing with bullies, if you give them your lunch money, they don't leave you alone. They just come back and shake you down for more. And the only way that we are going to show Donald Trump that we mean business is by hitting Americans where it hurts most. And we need to have not just Congress people and business leaders, but everyday Americans saying to Donald Trump, stop this nonsensical trade war with Canada. We cannot afford this. It is hurting us.
How much is the logic game important here, Karina? Because you just mentioned that you want to try to hammer home the point that this is not benefiting either side of the border. But sometimes I wonder if logic is lost on President Trump. So as much as you want to hammer back with our own countermeasures, how important is it just be in his ear trying to tell him what the reality is?
I think the only thing he's going to respond to is real economic pressure in the United States. So I agree with you. I don't think he's not going to say, oh, it's hurting Canada, therefore we're going to stop. I don't think he cares about that. And I think it's clear that that's not something that's going to make him change his mind. What's going to make him change his mind is Americans in red states, Congress people, business leaders saying to him, please stop this illogical, unnecessary provocation of Canada, because guess what? Our energy prices have gone up, our electricity prices have gone up, our food costs have gone up. You know, one thing that we haven't talked about a lot as Canada, but the U.S. relies on Canada for its potash, for its fertilizer. And if you look at, red states, who produces corn? Who needs that fertilizer from Canada? It's about 80 to 90% of American fertilizer input comes from Canada. So we have some big sticks that we can wield. We don't want to, but, we have to demonstrate to the Americans that it's not just to have the tariffs removed temporarily. It's that they need to be off the table entirely.
It's hard to predict what President Trump will do from day to day, even hour to hour, as we've seen. And as a cabinet minister during his first term and as president, you would have seen that firsthand. I'm sure had plenty of discussions behind closed doors about it. Well, it's a silly question or an obvious question, but how much of a challenge is that if you're prime minister, you know that your neighbor is completely unpredictable?
It's a huge challenge. I would say it's not even unpredictable. It's completely volatile. And what that means for us as Canada is that it's not that we need to turn away from the United States, because I think we need to continue to tend that relationship at all levels in the U.S., because it will continue to be an important relationship for us. But it also means that we have to think differently about our place in the world, about our economic, energy, defense, security, and who we work with in the world. I mean, we saw this week not just that he imposed tariffs on Canada and on Mexico, his two largest trading partners, but that he completely abandoned Ukraine. He suspended military assistance to Ukraine and is seeking a rapprochement with Putin, of all people. The United States under Donald Trump's leadership is abandoning the free world. And so, Canada's not going to be able to fill that void, but we have to stand firm and strong to our principles and our values and seek out partnerships and alliances with countries who are like-minded, who share our values and share our objectives. And that's why I think, getting closer with our NATO allies in Europe, getting closer with democratic countries in Asia, Latin America, Africa is going to be really important for us as Canada moving forward.
All right, I'm sure we're going to talk more about the Donald as this interview progresses, but let's talk more about you, Karina. You're one of four candidates for the Liberal leadership alongside Chrystia Freeland, Mark Carney, and Frank Baylis. Probably fair to say that some of our viewers and listeners may not know a lot about you, so the floor is yours. Tell us who Karina Gould is.
Yeah. Well, at first I thought you were going to say you're one of four children, so I'm the eldest of four. And I grew up, a middle class kid in Burlington, Ontario. My mom was a small business owner. She was a veterinarian, so I grew up working in her veterinary clinic. And I always say that was the best training for politics because I got to know people in my community and I got to talk to them sometimes at their happiest moments and sometimes at their hardest moments. And then my dad fought for farmers his entire life, so I've always had an appreciation for building strong rural communities. And I got elected 10 years ago in 2015. I became a cabinet minister the next year. I'm the youngest woman in Canadian history to have been appointed to cabinet, and I'm the first cabinet minister at the federal level to have given birth while being cabinet minister, and then I became the second to do that last year as well. And I've held four different portfolios: democratic institutions, international development, minister of families, and I was responsible for negotiating the childcare agreements across the country and implementing $10 a day childcare. And most recently, I've been the government house leader, defending, the important things that we've been working on as a government in the House of Commons, but more than anything, standing up for Canadians every day.
I grew up in Hamilton down the road from you, Karina, so It's nice to speak to someone from the neighborhood. I guess the question on some people's minds is, why run now? Why did you feel like this was the opportunity for you? Like you said, you're a young mother. You have a lot going on in your life. Why did you think this was the right moment to take on this challenge?
Because I think we need a leader who understands what Canadians are going through right now. I mean, look, the long shadow that Trump is casting has certainly impacted this leadership race and will have an impact on the upcoming election. But, the cost of living challenges continue to be real for Canadians. And I'm close to people. And I believe that politics is about people. And one of the things that, became very clear to me in the leadership debates last week was when my colleagues are talking about points on a graph, I'm talking about Canadian families and I'm talking about what policy means for people. And I really believe that the way for the Liberal Party to win the next election is not to be conservative light, but it's to be true to our values. And I wanted to run now because I see that Canada's at a crossroads, whether it's from the aggression from south of the border or whether it's from, a very different vision, a less kind, less compassionate, less inclusive vision that Pierre Poilievre and his iteration of this Conservative Party are putting forward. For me, I've always wanted to do this to help people and to do good things for this country, and that's why I'm stepping up now for this leadership race.
Can we talk a little bit about Justin Trudeau's announcement that he was going to resign? By the time that happened, there was a lot of Liberal MPs who had kind of lined up arguing the same thing, that he should step down. Were you one of them?
So I was not somebody who ever called for that publicly. I think it's the Prime Minister's decision. And I'm someone who's always been loyal. And loyalty is probably a rare thing in politics. But I didn't decide to run for office until it became clear, or run for the leadership until it became clear that the Prime Minister was stepping aside. But look, I think that Canadians were very clear that they felt it was time for him to step aside. And so I think he made the right decision.
It's interesting, too, because he's getting a lot of praise in recent days for the work he's been doing and the things he's been saying about Donald Trump. There's even people who have gone so far as to say that maybe he was, quote unquote, kicked to the curb too soon. Do you think we would have been better off, considering all that's happened, if he had stayed on?
Well, that's a very interesting hypothetical. Look, I think what will be clear for Canadians is that, and I think what is becoming clear for Canadians is that when they're choosing and have to make a decision about which political party they want to have in power to stand up and defend their interests, they're choosing the Liberal Party. It has always been the Liberal Party of Canada that has fought for Canada and fought for Canadians. And when they are looking at, do we want a Liberal Party or do we want a Conservative Party led by Pierre Poilievre, who quite frankly is a little Timbit Trump up here in Canada, who is trying to, emulate Donald Trump, who idolizes Elon Musk. They're saying we want someone who's going to do the hard work and fight for Canadians, not the guy who's trying to please Donald Trump.
Karina, the polls are showing two front runners in the Liberal leadership are Carney and Freeland. But tell us, why are you the better choice?
Well, again, for me, it's about people. It's everything that I would do as Prime Minister is making sure that I'm putting Canadians at the center of that. I think it's fantastic that we have four great people in this Liberal leadership race, and I think we're going to need all of us on the Liberal team, but most importantly on Team Canada, to stand up to Trump and stand up for Canadians. So I, as Prime Minister, will be inviting each of them to join my team to make sure that we have the strongest front and approach possible when it comes to the United States. But being Prime Minister is more than just managing the economy. Being Prime Minister is about guiding and leading an entire country, and you have to be able to do the economy, but you also have to be able to do security, and you have to be able to do international affairs, and you have to be able to do health, and you have to be able to do social issues. There's a lot that comes into being Prime Minister, and I can say, having sat around the cabinet table for almost a decade, I've learned a lot about what it takes to be a Prime Minister and what it takes to lead not just a government, but an entire people.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, lots of different issues on your plate at once when you're doing a job like that. One of them, obviously, is the carbon tax. It's something that a lot of Canadians are talking about, a lot of small business owners we've talked to recently, too, concerned about it. What would be your plan for the carbon tax if you do win this race?
Yeah, so I am committed to canceling the planned increase for April 1st. But at this point, I would keep the consumer price on pollution where it is. But I think we have to have an honest conversation with Canadians about what that looks like. And if we are going to replace it, what a replacement would be. Because there's two things here. One, when people are frustrated with the carbon tax, it's not that they don't care about the environment, and it's not that they don't care about fighting climate change. What they're really saying is we're in a cost of living crisis. And Pierre Poilievre has misled Canadians as to what the cause of that cost of living crisis is. It's not the price on pollution. It was inflation. It was coming out of the pandemic. And so that's why I've put forward, some bold ideas on actually making life more affordable for Canadians. We can't do everything as the federal government, but we could, and what I want to do is reduce the GST from 5% to 4%. That'll save Canadian families on average $700 to $750 a year. And to also say, let's really tackle housing in a big way. What we saw coming out of the pandemic was mortgage rates skyrocketing, rents increasing. And so let's make sure that we're actually building homes that people can afford at a price point that makes sense for them, and tackling the cost of living crisis that we're in.
And that's definitely the top thing on people's minds, the two things, the affordability crisis and housing. It is the thing we get asked about the most. So, Karina, what is it specifically that you would do as Liberal leader, as Prime Minister, to actually help a young couple, for example, be able to afford a house? That's the magic question.
Yeah, so I'm so glad you asked this, because I have a really big plan on housing.
All right.
And I have to say that I've been so disappointed during this Liberal leadership race that I haven't heard from my colleagues on what their housing plans are, except for copying Conservative ideas that frankly they're just not good enough when it comes to tackling housing. So a young couple, for example, I want to increase the first-time homebuyers incentive. So what this looks like is, right now we have a program. It doesn't really do what it's supposed to do, but it's supposed to help first-time homebuyers enter the housing market, but it only offers about 5 to 10% of a down payment. In the UK, they do this, but they do it at 50%. And what happens is over time, a young person who's entering the housing market can buy back their equity from the government, and that enables them, A, to purchase a home, and B, increase their share of the equity over time. And then at point of sale, they can pay it off before they sell their house, or when they sell their house, they pay it back to the government. But it's like the best way, in my opinion, to actually help folks get into the housing market. And then the idea is, as you grow in your career, as you get more income over time, you're able to pay off a larger share of your mortgage. So that's one thing. And then there's two other planks that I'm excited about. One is working towards eliminating homelessness in Canada. Poverty and homelessness costs us money. Let's get people housed. But it's not just about housing them, it's making them stable, enabling them to be stable. So I would also work with the provinces and territories to have bilateral agreements that would provide wraparound supports for people who were unhoused and are now housed to access mental health supports, addiction services, career and job training, so that once they're stable, if they're able to, they can join the workforce. And then the second part of this is to have a industrial housing policy where we build housing on a massive scale, but to do it in a smart and effective way. It's not about more $1 million homes like we're seeing in Ontario. It's about modular homes. It's about tiny homes. It's about making sure that we have non-market housing, whether that's not-for-profit or co-ops. Here in Ontario, we have so many amazing federal co-ops that create these diverse communities where people have an opportunity to rent at an affordable rate or become an owner at an affordable rate. So really, it's about creating that diversity of housing stock so that Canadians can have access to more choices and better prices.
I guess the question that everyone wonders is how quickly can we get those things started, and what would the cost of that be?
Yeah, so we have programs in place for homelessness for the Rapid Housing Initiative that we can just add more money to, and same thing with the industrial plan for housing. Where there is a will, there is a way, but we have to say, this is the crisis we are going to tackle and work on it in a very concerted way, and I believe that we can do it. The cool thing about housing is that, yes, it's big investment dollars, but it also generates a lot of revenue because it generates a lot of economic activity as well. And so it is one of those initiatives that is a solid investment because there's a really good return on investment.
All right, I want to talk about the English language debate the other night. I just finished watching it. And by the way, I think it was probably the most polite debate I've ever seen. What a contrast from American politics. But I know, Karina, you've said the real fight, the real debate is with Pierre Poilievre and Jagmeet Singh. You made a comment during the debate that stuck out to me, and I'd like you to tell me what you meant by it. You said you can't bring a calculator to a knife fight. What did you mean by that?
Well, what I meant by it is when we're fighting Donald Trump, who is coming at us with literally everything that he's got and that is going to hurt the Canadian economy, it's wonderful to talk about building one Canadian economy, and we should absolutely do that. But you got to fight fire with fire, right? And what that means is that, absolutely, do I want to grow the Canadian economy? Do I want to increase productivity here at home? For sure, 100%. But we have to have the chutzpah and the guts to truly stand up and defend our economy. And it kind of goes to the beginning of this conversation where we were talking about, how do we actually effectively stand up for Canada? We can't be afraid right now. We cannot be nervous about this. When the time calls, Canadians stand up and we meet the moment, and we have to do that as leaders in this country. And we have to do that as a government. And to your point about, the real fight that's coming, the leadership debate in English and in French, for Liberals, this was a conversation in the family. I was probably, the one that was pushing folks the most and was making the most pointed comments. But, that was nothing in comparison to what we would see from Pierre Poilievre, Yves-François Blanchet or Jagmeet Singh in the actual general election debate. And so we need somebody who is debate ready today, who can take these guys on and who can win. And I know how to do that. I've been doing it for a decade in the House of Commons, and I have full confidence that I'm ready to go today.
You talk about standing up for Canada as well. Part of that involves military spending, and I know that's been part of the debate here, whether we should be spending 2% of our GDP on military spending. What's your commitment? What would your plan be?
Yeah, my commitment is to spend 2% by 2027. And I think that this is an imperative for us right now. Going back to the events that have unfolded over the past week with Mr. Trump, we just can't rely on the United States for the defense of our hemisphere. And I'm, concerned about what this means for the defense relationship that we have between Canada and the U.S. So we need to really make sure that we are protecting ourselves. I would do this by increasing the salaries of our Canadian Armed Forces immediately. We do not pay them sufficient for the incredible work and service that they provide us. We ask them to be there for us at our time of greatest need, and they are always there. I would also appoint a procurement czar to ensure that we get military procurement up and running.
Karina, let's talk about your path to victory. What does it look like?
Well, it's trying to convince people to put me number one on their ballot, but also for the folks who, have decided to put someone else to choose me as their second choice. What I've heard from people, particularly following the debates, is that my message resonates with them. My vision for Canada is something that they share. And so my pitch to them is, you vote for me, I'm going to win. And to really give them the confidence that, they can cast their ballot for me. But I have to say the momentum coming out of the debates has been really wonderful. And it's been terrific to hear from Canadians and Liberals across the country who are excited about my candidacy and excited about the ideas that I'm putting on the table for the future of Canada.
I think I just read in the last few minutes that Chrystia Freeland said that if she does win the leadership, she's going to ask Mark Carney to serve as her finance minister. Have you had any conversations like that with any of the candidates?
Well, I'm glad she did that because about a week ago after the debates, I actually came out and said that as Prime Minister, I would invite all three of the other candidates to join my team because I think we need their talent and their expertise. I think, all four of us bring something important to the table.
All right. Karina, it's been a great conversation. Before we let you go, because we know how busy you are, anything that we didn't ask you or we didn't touch on that you wanted to throw out to the audience?
Well, just anyone who has registered to vote in the upcoming Liberal leadership race, make sure that you get your identity verified by Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you cast your ballot before Sunday afternoon. So it's really important to get those two things done. But look, thanks so much for having me. This was a terrific conversation.
All right, there's Karina Gould fighting to be the next leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. Good luck on Sunday. Karina, appreciate the time today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.